Oh, good. We're working on our infrastructure. We just closed our infrastructure survey that we do. This will be the fourth year. Yeah, so we'll have new stats. They don't, they're probably not refined enough to put down to a state level. They're not, because with 500, 600 people nationwide, it wouldn't tell you exactly, but it'll tell you what the nationwide challenges are, and progress we're making, and things like that.
Okay, good. Yeah, I saw that survey that came out. So
Yeah.
look forward to.
It should be in 2 weeks.
Okay, wow, that's pretty. That's
good. Yeah,
for an analysis.
we turn it around pretty fast. This week I'll get the preliminary, then they have to make it look pretty and edit. So.
Okay. And those were mainly infrastructure questions.
They are. Our leadership survey is one that we release at our annual conference. We'll go live with that in December, and that'll be open in January, early February.
Okay.
Those are more, so we do 2 surveys a year, infrastructure and leadership.
Okay.
Rick's retiring too. That's right. Ready? When you're ready.
So welcome everyone. This is our session on digital equity. This has been a real focus for VSTE both last year and this year. The VSTE Coast and Council's webinar in September focused on digital equity and featured several school divisions and both the challenges that they're facing in some cases to try to close that school to home access, making sure that everyone in their community has internet access. And the archive for that webinar can be found at the VSTE website. And it went an hour and a half. We really got into it and had a variety of different examples of what school divisions were doing. But also, this is one of those cases where it's a challenge, I know, for a lot of you. So we're pleased to bring together the panel that we have today. We did some quick substitutions. Chris Hartley from Cumberland County was unable to join us. He was going to talk about some of the initiatives they're doing with wiring buses, which of course is one of the things we've heard about. But luckily, all of us are flexible and willing to share our expertise, so we were able to add a few folks. So what I'm going to do is just go down, introduce the folks on the panel, and then each one of them will take some time to talk about what they're doing in the area of digital equity, but we would love this to be interactive as well. So as you think of questions, jot them down, and I'm sure we'll have time to answer some of those. So to my right is Stephen Knight. Stephen is from Falls Church City Public Schools. He's going to talk about some of the work they're doing, particularly around loaning out MiFis to students. Vince Scheivert and Becky Fisher are here from Albemarle County, and every time I talk about what you're doing, I have to go, I'm not really sure what it means. So I'm glad to be able to sit in on the panel, but they're doing something with the TV spectrum in Albemarle County. Did I get that about right?
About right.
Yeah, okay, good. Keith Kruger has volunteered also to come on board because he can give us some of the bigger picture things that are going on across the country and talk a little bit about this. We're talking about wiring buses, so talk a little bit about that. And then on the end is Susan Clare. Susan is, I'm not sure what your title, you'll tell us when you talk what your title is, but she's from the Department of Education. She focuses primarily on E-rate, but also has some lessons that she learned from some things that she's been doing out there as well. So I'm excited to welcome all of them, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Stephen.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. As Karen mentioned, I'm from Falls Church City, and I'm the coordinator of digital learning. We just rolled out our personalized learning initiative. We're on our 3rd year, and that is we call that our one-to-one initiative. And now that we're on our 3rd year, we're really focusing on making sure that everyone in the community has wireless access. Our 1st year, we focused on just the high school because that's where we went one-to-one with our MacBook Airs. We gave every high schooler a MacBook Air. So we wanted to make sure they were going into homes that had wireless. And now we're focused more on the entire community, pre-K-12. The 3 tenets of our personalized learning is enhancement of teaching and learning, the preparation for a modern world, and equity for all students. And equity is extremely important for us and our superintendent, Dr. Jones, and so we've really pushed to make sure that, like I mentioned, everyone has wireless access. We are now actually assigning surplus laptops to families that don't have computers in their house. We're handing them laptops with free technical support, home visits, and we're hopefully moving forward with more of the one-to-one take-home model for our middle school, so more of our kids and families have access. As I mentioned before, we're handing out MiFis, the Verizon Jetpack, and basically all we're doing is adding those MiFi units to our cell service with Verizon already. For all the administrators and all the principals have cell phones, and so we're just adding the MiFi units onto that cell phone package. And basically the process for those requests can come from anywhere. We have several different orientations. Our first year of personalized learning, when we handed out the laptops to the community, we had 35 1.5-hour sessions between July and August to make sure that we had small sessions for parents to come in, kids getting their laptops, but parents having the ability to ask administrators questions, ask us questions about the vision and mission of the initiative. That was a great time for parents to come up to us and say, we don't have internet access at home, or our internet access is very spotty, can you help us? We've also had, for the last 3 years, ELL family nights, and we've been able to hand out MiFi units at those events, also issue computers to the families that need them. And so actually at those events, we can actually work with the computers, set them up with the MiFi, so when they walk out, they're actually fully connected. It's amazing to think about when we first started funding this, there was a line item in our school board budget for paying for the MiFi service. But we've actually reached out to our Education Foundation for Falls Church City. And every year we have an event where they collect money from the community members, and we've actually been able to fully fund it through the Education Foundation. We haven't had to use school board money yet. And that's basically because our parents in the community are donating to make sure that all kids are connected at home. Okay, that's Falls Church.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Vince Scheivert. I'm the Chief Information Officer for Albemarle County Public Schools. At Albemarle County Public Schools, I oversee the Department of Accountability, Research, and Technology. That encompasses both operational as well as instructional technology. And Becky Fisher is my Director of End User Experience. A couple years ago, we started down a path to where on the superintendent's desk is a little wooden carving that says all means all. And when we looked around at the resources and capability that our students have, we understood that all didn't mean all in Albemarle County. Albemarle County, if you don't know where it is, we are almost geographically right in the center of the state. So we butt up to the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains and kind of span across to the Piedmont of Goochland, Henrico-like area. We are a microcosm of the United States. So right in the center of our 726 square miles sits Charlottesville, Virginia, home of the University of Virginia. So where we have that 40 square miles of absolute urbanized, everything flies, everything goes, everything's there and available. And as you move east, west, north, south, that quickly dissipates into either geographically diverse, geographically challenged, or socioeconomically challenged. So inside of our county, about half of our students live in that 40 square miles of urban area, suburban area, to where they have high-speed broadband access. They have the capability of having all the modern accoutrements that we would necessarily want or think that anybody in the 21st century should have. As you get out into the other 680 square miles, where the other 50% of our students live, not so much. The idea of self-service doesn't necessarily exist in a lot of those areas, and it becomes a problem. So for us, all didn't mean all. We had the opportunity through the economic downturn to have something come across my desk that related to the educational broadband spectrum. So like a lot of school divisions, we had taken the educational broadband spectrum and we had leased it out. And that was all good and gravy. Everybody thought that they were kind of getting a piece from it. But when it came back across in terms of this letter of default, I knew what it was. So I knew that it provided the school division wireless spectrum to be able to provide broadband access at high rates. I knew what the challenges were as related to the concept of what the 2.5 gigahertz spectrum gives us or doesn't give us. And since then, I've had a team working on how are we able to deploy it. So right now, currently, we are in the deployment stages of rolling out the school division's own LTE network that will encompass and provide broadband access throughout our 726 square miles. So we fully plan that across that 726 square miles, we will have ubiquitous coverage for our students to be able to connect anywhere and anytime they need. And at that point, we feel all will mean all. So right now, we have that capability running in certain geographic areas. We have about 30% coverage right now. We'll continue to roll that out. And right now, our partners in public safety who have the same challenges our students do, we're working with them to be able to gain access to their vertical real estates. So in all of our counties, the emergency communications group probably more than likely has cell towers or radio towers that they've been operating, and we've been working with them to be able to put our LTE equipment on there as well as on top of our schools. So right now, like I said, we have about a 30% coverage. We're going to roll out broadband access to LTE access to about 1,000 households between now and probably Christmas. We have had some high poverty, high translation area issues to where we've used the LTE as backhaul. So what we've done is we've actually established Wi-Fi hotspots or zones, because it'll be the entire housing community. So we have a certain number of housing communities that are socioeconomically depressed that we actually have it set up to where when they go home, it's just like sitting in third period math. They go home, turn their laptop on, they're connected to our network, and there is no translation or difference between home or school for them, which is a game changer. It's a game changer. So they used to have to shut down, power down, and turn off. But our big moniker right now is we're not necessarily planning to be able to issue textbooks based upon your physical address, nor do we want to necessarily say you can't access digital resources. So with that, that's kind of been our big push from a technology standpoint with the utilization of our LTE deployment, and I'll let Becky kind of talk about what we're doing from a device perspective.
Hi. So a lot of folks are talking about that they have deployed. One of our questions is, what are you deploying and how are you deploying it? Now, just keep in mind also that everything that Vince and I will be talking about, we're doing with no new money. So we're doing this without budget initiatives. So we are having to make much better decisions. So we're really looking at how do we get the best bang for the buck. So what kinds of devices are we buying, and how are we dealing with that? You know, another question is who decides what goes on that image of the device and how that device is managed. We're really professing to be a UDL school district, so Universal Design for Learning. So one of the decisions, everything that we're doing aligned to that decision to really support Universal Design for Learning. And one of the things that we've done with that is every kid, grades 6 through 12, not only has a Windows 10 device, but they're also the local administrator on that device. So while we give them a freshly minted image every school year, they also can customize that and make it their own. What does that mean for us from a support standpoint? Well, yeah, so in middle school, we at the high school level, we re-image about 60% of the machines at least once. And at the middle school level, we're about this year about 3 times that. So we're getting better on that. But we've also figured out that we have a lot of kids that are interested in doing this sort of work, so we have student help desks in each of our secondary schools as well. So we are one-to-one in the classroom, grades 4 and 5, and most third grades. We've got 3 more schools to complete there next year. And then one-to-one take-home, 24/7, grades 6 through 12 in all of our schools. So we've got about 1,000 kids in each grade level, just so you can do the math. And all of that is simply using money that existed, that was part of our revenue stream for the past several years, just doing it better. So we also, one of the things that we're looking at as well is how do we, seeing that kids are not necessarily the most discerning downloaders of stuff, how do we help them become better downloaders? So we're running our, what the kids are referring to as, hey, you've got your own software store. So we're looking at kids being able to hit one of our sites and be able to grab the installs that they want. And it fits into that, helping them become better managers of their digital world and their technology tools, and also recognizing that not everybody wants or needs the same thing. So that's the big piece that I can speak to here. We can also talk about how we've engaged our parents and our community at large in embracing the digital learning initiative that we've taken on.
And I feel like the bad penny back again, but I'm really excited actually to be on this panel because COSN really believes that digital equity is in fact the civil rights issue of today. It's in fact an extension of the 50-year commitment that we've had as a country to equal educational opportunity. And if we really believe that learning is going digital, we have to make sure that it isn't just at school, but outside of school, and particularly the biggest challenge is at home. So you can go to our website, and under key initiatives you'll see the Digital Equity Initiative, and there's a free toolkit that I would encourage you to download, which has a lot of advice on first steps that you can do and some case examples. So specifically, I was asked to talk about putting Wi-Fi on buses, and this has gotten a lot of media attention. We think the first place in the country that kind of experimented with it that we're aware of was out in California. Superintendent Daryl Adams from Coachella Valley. It's a largely Hispanic migrant community south of Los Angeles. He said kids are on the buses for up to an hour and 15 minutes a day. They're going home to trailer parks and low-income neighborhoods, and they don't have internet. And so he decided that bus time could be recaptured as instructional time and put Wi-Fi on buses. That was really a good idea. The next year, they had an even better idea, and that was, does it really matter where the bus parks at night? So they added solar panels, and the buses are now parked in trailer parks or in low-income neighborhoods. And it runs all night long until they run out of electricity. Does it really matter where the school bus driver picks up the bus? And they've created essentially filtered mobile internet access for Coachella Valley School District. This is an idea that's really gaining currency, and in fact, this is really timely because we're, just last week, Senator Tom Udall, the senator from New Mexico, has written to the FCC, to Chairman Wheeler, asking that they explore expanding E-rate for Wi-Fi on buses. Our friends at the FCC have asked COSN to advise them, and so we are collecting data now on what the costs and strategies are of school districts that are putting Wi-Fi on buses. So if you have done this, we would love to know about it. We'd love any data that you have. We're trying to figure out what the cost implications are for that would be on the E-rate program. Let me also just mention two other things while I have the microphone, and that are new opportunities. We really think that this conversation about digital equity isn't just about school districts. It's about engaging with your mayors, with your communities, with your business communities. And so one thing we're doing is encouraging innovative school districts that are working on digital equity to submit for a new award that we're going to give out, the Community Digital Equity Award, and we'll put that announcement will be coming out in the next week or so, and you can apply for it and be honored at the COSIN conference. We've also believed that it isn't just about adults dealing with this issue, but we ought to listen to students. And so we've issued the Student Video Challenge, a Digital Equity Video Challenge. And by that, what we really would like you to do is to get students to create either a 60-second or less PSA, public service announcement, about what the Digital Equity Challenge is in your community, or a longer, up to 4-minute video, which is we're calling a mini documentary, and not only what the problem is, but what can students do to address it. And there's a great example outside of Charlotte where a student was sitting with their father over dinner table and said, why do some of my friends go home and not have access to the internet and not have devices? And your father said, well, that's largely driven by poverty and income. But he said the more important question is, what are you going to do about it? So they started a nonprofit called Eliminate the Digital Divide. They now do virtual lemonade stands to raise money, and they've now connected over 1,000 school families in Davidson, North Carolina. They're now working with the school district, Charlotte-Mecklenburg, and expanding that to every school across the county. So get your communities involved, and keying off of kind of the innovative things that are happening in Charlottesville. The city of Charlottesville has now put Wi-Fi in laundromats. Think about where poor mothers sit with their kids. They sit at the laundromat. So there's lots of innovative conversations that need to happen, and with that, I'll turn it over to Susan.
My name is Susan Clare, and I started my new position in July, so I'll tell you what I know for 3 months on the job. I'm the new Learning Infrastructure Coordinator, and some of you may have gotten emails from me regarding reminders and information on E-rate. I work directly with Bobby Keener. There's just 2 of us in his office, so it's Bobby and I. One of the initiatives that we're working on is the K-12 Learning Infrastructure partnership with Education Superhighway, the Friday Institute, Governor's Office, and the Secretary of Education. And there's 3 goals of that particular program. One is to help schools that don't have fiber to get on fiber. Secondly, it's to assist schools in upgrading their internal connections, their Wi-Fi connections with E-rate. And also, so those are the main goals of that program. I did attend the Universal Services Administrative Company. Some of you know that as USAC. In the last week of September, and this topic about putting Wi-Fi on buses was discussed. But what I could pick up from the meeting was this is all new, kind of a new policy issue that USAC was getting information from state E-rate coordinators about. And as Keith said, I think the FCC is looking into this as a possible kind of extension or integral part of E-rate funding. The other thing I do know is what is happening in Charlottesville, or not Charlottesville, excuse me. It's Charlotte and Mecklenburg County. The department was contacted. This was probably my second week on the job. There were 2 researchers from one was from Microsoft, and the other researcher was from, I want to say, the University of Tennessee, and they had contacted us to see if they could get student SOL data because they were doing a research study to evaluate the impact of internet access for students who would have internet access at home through this new technology called TV white space. Some of you may have heard about it. I don't know that much about it, but it's a partnership between Microsoft and I think it's the Mid-Atlantic Broadband Network, and what their intent is to do is to have internet access into these low-income homes in Charlotte and Mecklenburg. Is anybody here from Charlotte, Mecklenburg? Okay. So there was a documentation from the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, that came out recently about this project, and the FCC is seeking comment on it. And so the State E-Rate Coordinators Alliance will be commenting on this particular issue, but if you're interested in looking at it, it should be on the FCC website. And the other resource that I wanted to mention that I know about, and I want to learn more about what they do and how they do it, and they're working at the policy level in DC, is Shelby. I don't know if you've ever heard of Shelby. It's schools, libraries, healthcare, broadband consortium, and I think they're relatively new, but their focus is to look at how community, they call them anchor institutions, like your hospitals, your libraries, and schools, how they can all work together to get affordable broadband connectivity. And I think that's it.
Great, thanks. So anything pop into heads of previous presenters as they listen to the others before I ask questions, or?
The idea behind the TV white space. So the TV white space, you may know it more as the unlicensed spectrum. So in terms of when the FCC rolled everything back in 1997 and eliminated educational television, over-the-air television stations, that's how the 2.5 gigahertz spectrum kind of worked. So if you remember when you were growing up, you had that dial and had the VHF and the UHF. So when they started to get rid of some of those higher band channels, that's where the educational broadband spectrum comes from. That's also where this unlicensed spectrum area comes from, generally in like the 3.4, 3.5. Just a little education if you don't necessarily know. The higher of the frequency that you get, so most cell phones are going to work probably in the 500 to 700 megahertz. The educational broadband spectrum is in the 2.5 gigahertz. So the higher the band, the more interference can cause. So the smaller the wavelength, the more data it can carry, but also the more things that can block it. So when we're talking about the 2.5 gigahertz spectrum, I can't deploy my services the same way that AT&T or Verizon can, to where they have this bigger wave that goes out and goes further. Doesn't carry as much data. But that's why I'm able to achieve broadband speeds and be able to have 30, 40 meg downloads for my kids, to where with a typical AT&T, you're going to get like 2 or 3. Depending on how close I am to the cell tower, and that's where we're building out these micro areas, because we know most kids live close to their elementary schools. So in all of my elementary schools, we're putting cell tower broadcast capabilities. There, depending on the amount of folks that we have connecting, we're seeing anywhere between 500 and potentially up to, as we add on a couple different bands, potentially up to 100 meg download. So when you think about it, I now have the capability of competing, although I would never compete with commercial vendors. I have the ability to provide probably higher speeds than most commercial vendors are going to provide. And the other luxury I have versus AT&T or Verizon is I know where all my kids live. So when we first started designing and rolling these out, I had a big map on my wall and had little dots all over it. So when we were looking at where we're going to deploy services, I knew exactly where we were going to have to get, I still know where we're going to have to get a little creative because I can't solve that with the existing structures and capabilities. And just one quick thing to follow up on something Becky said, we're doing this all with repurposed money. And I'm actually going to build out, since I'm utilizing the existing infrastructure, both the physical location, i.e. all my schools already have fiber connectivity to them. I'm already buying internet access for them as well as WAN access. My only real cost is the equipment to broadcast and the equipment for the kids to connect. And right now, it's actually costing me half of the amount that Wi-Fi costs. So in terms of scalability or capability, I'm going to say these things aren't out of the realm of possibility, although you may not have thought of them. So we're an open book. We'll have you down. You can come in, talk to us. We've had people from all over the country kind of swing through, in state and out of state, to be able to talk.
Yeah, and another piece, mentioned the competition. This spectrum will only be available to our devices. So while we offer public Wi-Fi in our schools with limitations,
We don't do it at home.
we won't do that at home. So we're not usurping the commercial world. We're just trying to get to the kids that can't afford to join. Vince, what's your home internet access? What's your provider?
Technically, in terms of my home internet, it sucks. I'm out in that western part of Albemarle County, so I sit out among the cows, and I don't have landline capabilities. So I actually subscribe to one of those unlicensed small WISPs that are out there that are operating in the unlicensed spectrum and getting poor service, but it's better than no service.
And my home internet access, I'm a little further west towards the mountains from Vince. My home internet access is a Verizon 4G MiFi, which I can afford, but a lot of the kids up the mountain from me can't afford it, and they live in the shadow of the 4G towers that are there. So that's what we're trying to go after. It's real for us, we live it, and it's also real for many of the kids in our district.
Well, and I'll just chime in here real quick. So we decided to move from those wonderful suburban, urban areas that you mentioned to a farm about 5 years ago, and I ran VSTE, including webinars and everything, on a Verizon MiFi for the first year and a half until DSL became available. But I was sharing with them that right as I left on Monday, the charter cable truck came driving down the lane to the farm because they had told me I'm in their service area, but they basically said, you're too far from the road, you're this, you're that, they pretty much denied me service. So, I'm not worried about my civil rights, but, when you think about, I at least have a voice in this when most of our kids have no one to go to them. So we're hopeful that we can prove that there's enough. But it is amazing how many of us in the ed tech world are living in places with really sad internet access, but have the ability to pay for it, and that's, I think, the big issue here as well. Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, I was just, I thought it would be useful to talk about how do you get started, because I think conceptually people agree with it. And what we found is that a lot of people have opinions about how much of a problem it is in your school or school district, but not a lot of people have good data. How many are already kind of surveying students and parents around whether or not they have high-speed access at home? Okay, so a few hands, but I don't see every hand. So one of the things that we've done is we've partnered with the Friday Institute at North Carolina State University, and on our website you can find like 5 questions you should ask students and 5 you should ask parents, so that you start to get good data by individuals, because without that, all you have is opinions, and you really need to be able to know who is it. And in fact, we've been asking kind of the old wrong question, which is, do you have a device? Do you have connectivity? But that's not refined enough to know today what device they're doing and what kind of connectivity they have. And in fact, as the Pew Internet an American Life has pointed out, it's really the underconnectivity of many. There are about 5 million families that don't have broadband at home, but increasingly kids rely on smartphones, and they're on data caps. And could you really, fill out your essay online? And the other thing that is a real easy first step that we see many school districts do is mapping out Wi-Fi, community Wi-Fi. How many of you are already going to like your business community and doing that? This is for instance, Fairfax County does it. They go out to all the businesses and map out and put on a map on their website for students saying, and they've created a nice little logo. So it says, we're a homework Wi-Fi partner of Fairfax County School District. It doesn't really cost the school district anything. Everybody should be doing this. What Charlotte Mecklenburg has done is they've mapped out where there are what they call Wi-Fi deserts. And they've worked with their local city and county mayors to deploy other solutions. So I think there's lots of different things. And the last thing I'll say is an example that we haven't talked about, that Lindsay School District in California has worked with their city government, and they've deployed a public Wi-Fi for their community. So there's a whole range of things. We're not saying what the right answer is for your community, but there's lots of different choices, and I think you've already heard a number of them. The important thing is to really get that conversation going, and that means you're going to have to work with some people that you probably haven't typically done, the political leadership, the business community, the philanthropic community, those that are working on economic development have a big vested interest in that. Particularly if you think of like where fiber is being deployed, when Google Fiber or any of the competitors go into a city like they did in Kansas City or Austin, they go door to door, basically, and ask, would you pay for $30 a month or for a really fast connection, or $70 a month for an extremely fast connection? But the ones that won't take that, of course, are the poor neighborhoods. So how do we make sure that there isn't digital redlining?
Questions from the group out there? Burning issues or? Go ahead.
Sure, awesome question. So I don't have the same issues. I don't have the same issues that a typical telecommunications provider has. So if you look at Albemarle County, we're almost cut into quadrants. So we have 29 that runs north and south, and we have 64, 250 that run east and west. AT&T and Verizon are on all of those, and they're pretty good as long as you're within that period. Our cellular or our telecommunications Motorola group, our emergency communications group, has cell towers in those other areas and other places. So the vertical assets exist, but a typical telecommunication provider can't find it economically feasible to put it up there. So the conversation I had with our Board of Supervisors was, I don't have to have a number of subscribers per vertical asset to justify it. If a kid needs access, that's justification in itself. So the means are there, the capabilities are there, just the business model doesn't exist for your AT&T and Verizons. And I'm pleased to be able to say that I don't follow that constraint. There was a question back here.
Maybe you could address how you handle filtering.
Sure.
Both the Wi-Fi and for you guys.
Stephen?
It is not filtered. The MiFi is not filtered. It's when it's handed to the families, there's a lot of conversations about, what they can access, the dangers, and it needs to be monitored. So we are not filtering the MiFis.
But there are solutions that are filtered MiFi and for buses too.
So for us, no matter whether you're on our network or off our network, our devices work back and you are filtered this year based on our product that we use for our content filtering. But in our service, you're still connected to the school division's network. So what we've done with our LTE is we haven't said this is another network. This is just a layer of our network. So whether you're connecting via Wi-Fi in schools or you're connecting via LTE, you're all the same network. So you're passing back through our data center. You have access and resources to everything that you would normally have, your home folder, shared drives, et cetera. You have access to that universally where you are.
My understanding is that on buses, though, that if you're going back to that speed can be a problem going through the filter. So there are certain solutions that filter it directly what's on the bus in order to address that.
So filtered or unfiltered, you kind of began to touch on what are the students doing with the access that they have at home. And if it's unfiltered, obviously you're not kind of directing. You can go to your learning management system, you're going to be doing these assignments. So has your district or have people started looking at what is the usage at home? What are the students actually doing that's enhancing learning, which is our ultimate goal with any technology, is to enhance their learning.
Our chief technology officer constantly, he's the one who actually issues them and manages the reports and all of that. So he's constantly looking at the bandwidth usage and what's going on with it. As far as the conversations that we push it out, I mean, it's a lot of that conversation with parents, it's check-in with parents, it's check-in with kids. It's a lot of conversations about how are you using this at home. We have not seen any abuse of the devices based on our reports. So we're not seeing that, the whole neighborhood's watching Netflix on it necessarily, but we are able to kind of monitor it from that reporting standpoint.
So my answer would be whatever they need to do. We survey our kids every year. We have a longitudinal study. We work well with the group from Project Tomorrow. So we have historical data kind of asking them what kind of learning they're doing both in school and out of school. So whether it's formal learning or informal learning, our kids are saying that they're spending about 70% of their online time learning something new. Now, whether or not that is algebra or history, frankly, I don't care. As long as they're advancing themselves or finding stuff and gaining and building interest. So we refer to our stuff as a personal learning device, and sometimes that personal learning device will match up with the things that they're trying to learn in school, or we're trying to teach them, as they said earlier. Other times, they're just going to be advancing themselves and making themselves hopefully a better person for it.
And actually, Karen shared an article with us, and it kind of fits one of our mantras in Albemarle. The best filters we can install are in the kids. So that's part of what we still go, yes, we filter, we're legal, but still helping kids become critical consumers and creators in this digital world is, I mean, if the kids leave us with those skills, that's awesome. And how are they going to do it if we're really totally locked down and take all of that deciding away from them? But definitely staying legal is important.
I completely agree with what you're saying. I'll also say that there are school districts like Miami-Dade in Florida or Green Bay, Wisconsin, which do a filtered. So what the kids or the family access is, of course, the same as what you'd get at school. And there was some interesting research that Miami-Dade did. They had received a BTOP program under a few years ago, which is now expired. But they were looking at parental, particularly from low-income families, how parents were accessing education information and how connected they were to their students' their child's education. And it was overwhelmingly positive, like 95% feeling more connected because they were able to go online. You know, I think sometimes we talk about this homework gap, which is a good catchy headline, but it isn't all about homework. It's also making sure that parents and guardians are engaged, and that how many of you know, are really sending back flyers, but instead you're directing them to websites for homework help and things like that. Well, if they're not connected, how are they doing that? The same is true it's way beyond just about access for homework. It's about rethinking learning that doesn't just happen at school, but outside. So I think we have to be very careful when we use the term homework gap, that we quickly say, and it's more than homework.
Absolutely. One of the things, you know, that we're working with the kids to do is if they are in a situation where they're taking their school division issued laptop home without connectivity, how can they grab what they need and run it locally? Now, granted, you don't have access to YouTube, but you could go and download a lot of what we have digital subscriptions to and put that in your digital backpack. So teaching kids and teachers about that is a big part of what we're doing also. I think that's important. We did look at statistics early on when we adopted Google Apps for education, and we did, you know, one of the reports that stands out to me was looking at the time stamping for when kids are creating new files. And we had a time period where like 40% of the new stuff that was created outside of school hours. So that was really cool. They were doing that in our domain. So really looking at stuff like that, if that's a question, what are they doing? You know, grabbing those data that you have access to through your Google dashboard, through your learning management system. You know, how many kids are hitting that? How many kids are hitting your digital subscriptions? And are you pushing that out for the kids that have access? And then what percentage of your kids are actually offloading stuff so that they can take it home and use it without access? Do your teachers know how to do that, how to support that kid? And are they thinking about their assignments for that kid? And in many of our classes, you know, it may be just the one kid. And how does the teacher know? Well, we're putting the data out there that based on the Speak Up survey, kids have said this. But, you know, you ask a room full of high school kids, does everybody in here have high-speed internet access? And you're not going to necessarily be the one kid to raise your hand and say no. So how do we work with teachers on that so that they really do dig in and see and start looking for patterns in student behavior that cause them to have that one-on-one conversation and then figure something out for that kid?
And there is a blog up on the COSN website, which I wrote, looking at how different school districts are experiencing, a lot of them are doing these MiFi sort of solutions, what their actual data usage was, do they have caps and things like that. So there's the best data we could find around the experience. And it really does vary depending on whether or not the school district is filtering or not.
And I want to clarify, we're not off the rails in Falls Church City. So 90% of our connectivity, 90% of the households we give MiFi, we're giving also a device. So the kids are taking their laptops, their school laptops home. The middle school is not a take-home, but when parents request, because they need the device at home, we're allowing the kids to take home their filtered school-issued device. Even if we're giving the surplus PC laptops or the surplus computers to families that want a computer at home, that is also filtered on our network, and we let the parents know because we want, you know, kids to be safe. Just clarification.
And I'm just going to pop in here to advertise a little VSTE program, but also some of the things that we're finding out. So October is Connected Educator Month. And as part of what we're doing for Connected Educator Month, on Thursdays of each Thursday of the month, we're doing what I called classroom snacks. And as no one could come up with a better name, that's what it's called. But these are short virtual visits with students. So one of our mantras at VSTE has become, we we spend a lot of time talking about kids like we are right now, and we'd like to really facilitate some talking to kids. And so we're working with school divisions. We did this for Digital Learning Day in February as well. So Prince William County was our first group last Thursday. This Thursday will be in Frederick County, and then Roanoke County, and hopefully Wise County at the end of the month. And these are 10 or 15-minute visits with groups of students throughout the day. If you go to VSTE.org, the schedule is set up for there. And we just talk to them about technology. How are you using it in school? How are you using it out of school? What kind of things do you like to do with it? Those kinds of things. Just a chance to touch base with this group that we talk about a lot. One of the messages that came out loud and clear on Thursday from a pretty astute 8th grader at Bull Run Middle School was, we really wish you would trust us a little more. And I thought that was just, of the whole day, they all did a great job, but that really was the message of, you know, kind of give us a break here. Have those conversations with us, you know, really talk to us, but do a little bit of a trust as well. And as adults, sometimes that's hard for us because we know there's really bad things out there that they can sometimes just stumble upon. But the message was that we want to work with you with these kinds of things and just trust us. And I think that can be helpful.
So we get the question a lot about student breakages in their devices. So students outnumber teachers probably about 11 or 12 to 1. And what I'll say is kids break things, teachers and administrators destroy things. So in terms of overall cost, even though there's a differential of 11 to 1, 12 to 1, in terms of how much it costs to repair, it actually costs us more to repair our teacher machines and our administrator machines than it does our student machines. Because again, breaking a screen and completely blowing up or destroying or pouring rum and cokes or whatever they're drinking at home into their keyboards and completely frying them is completely different than breaking a keyboard or busting a screen. So one's $100 and one's $1,300. So in terms of what teachers are breaking and kids are breaking, it's a different piece.
We have a couple minutes left. Other questions or comments? And I'd be happy to come running down off the stage, although at my age it's probably sort of limping along off the stage. But if you have comments about your school division or things that you're doing that we haven't touched on here, programs that have been successful. Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Great.
Yeah, great point. Right now, the families that we issued are actually, they're staying in the district. We're constantly making sure that we're checking the location of the MiFis and where they're being accessed. And so we are keeping track of them. It is one of those things that's constantly on our minds. As for the computers, because they're our surplus, if the families take it with them, they take it with them. But the MiFis, as soon as we notice they're out of district, we turn them off. And a lot of times we turn them off if we see, and this is something that Rick does, is that if he sees inactivity in the MiFi, then we'll shut down the device, reach out to the family and say, hey, do you know where it is? And try to work with them there. So we are keeping track of that for sure.
I think Fairfax actually had a study for Belvoir area. I think they had a study in terms of retention rates for device deployments. You can check with them.
Yeah, and we have the capacity to remote and lock down any of the devices that we send home with kids, and we've had to do that if kids don't hit the turn-in deadlines.
Not activate the webcam.
Right. Yeah, we don't activate the webcams.
It's a buddy of mine. Yes, sir.
Yeah, when you give the surplus,
Realize we're not picking up the questions on our feed.
When you give the surplus computers out, do you have the parents sign an agreement, or what do you do?
We have the families. The families all sign off on the acceptable use policy every year. Same with the students. As for proof of renter's insurance or anything like that, we don't do that in the city. because they're surplus machines, they're off our inventory. We do ask them to, we don't have any formal signature really, but we do ask them to be a little bit respectful about their tech support. We do provide home visits for the first initial install, and then we ask that they only bring, have their children bring the device to school, and we kind of tinker around to make sure it works. But yeah, we don't have any official signage for that.
One of the things we didn't talk about is in many communities, Kansas City, New York City, and even some rural parts of Maine, the public library is in fact doing loaner of these kind of hotspots or MiFis. So you could, it may be worth a conversation with your local public librarian to find out what's possible. In New York City, qualifying families can check out the hotspot for up to a year.
Hold on one second. We're just grabbing you.
Behind you.
Microphone to your left.
What's your replacement cycle for your computers in your district that then qualify for the surplus? And how long do those surplus stay out there? Like, is it a 2-year, a 3-year surplus that you're letting them have them? Like, how can they then cycle through a newer model?
Right now we lease our MacBooks for a 3-year lease. And then the hope is that they last another 3 years in our elementary schools. And so we funnel down from the high school, middle school to our elementary schools. At the 6th and 7th year, we haven't reached that for the Macs yet, but at the 6th and 7th year, they would become surplus. And then we would be able to issue them out to the families. Right now, we're working with PC laptops, Dell laptops, that have been, they were cycled out about 6 years ago.
How long do you see them lasting out in the families? Like 1 year, 2 year, 3 years?
It's definitely a short situation. The families that stay with us for a long time, we are making sure that it's working. If it's not, it's being replaced by another one. We recognize that it is, it's an older device. If we could give them a newer one, we would. I think once we move into the Mac surplus, I'm a little biased with Mac, and Mac lasts a little longer. So I think we'd have more of a success rate with the Mac device, but we're not there yet.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we have, with our one-to-one take-home, we're on a 4-year replacement cycle. The first 3 years is under an accidental protection warranty that has minimal cost to us. And then, so the 4th year of the middle school machines, those machines cycle back in as the spares and the loaners. And then state law affords us the opportunity to donate to individuals once a device has lived its usefulness in the school division. So we began piloting that last year, and it was true transfer of ownership. So we have a letter that the few places, Vince mentioned one of our community centers earlier that we wired up, got on our network. We also donated some of the end-of-life laptops there as a test to see how that would go. So
what we do is we buy computers for 6th graders and we buy them for 9th graders. And then they keep them for the duration of their educational experience in one of 2 levels. And when they're seniors, they just walk off with the machine.
right, that's the plan.
Anyone else? Questions, comments?
Lunchtime?
It's lunchtime, so a big thank you to our panel.
Okay.
And it is indeed lunchtime. So you're in the room, you get first choice. Well, thank you so much